and welcome back to Crypto Sapiens. Today's episode is a bit different than others you may have grown familiar with. It is one of a 4-part miniseries that explores journalism and Web3. DeJourno is a series hosted by Crypto Sapiens with the help of JournoDAO and other top builders in the Web3 and journalism space. It seeks to return to the roots and definition of what journalism is all about and to demystify the concepts and tools in Web3 that can aid in the process of decentralizing journalism. We hope to present to you, our dear listeners, with many of the novel applications that are being developed today. I truly hope you enjoy this content and find it useful in your crypto journey. Let's get started. Hey everybody, I'm Eureka John, and I'm back for episode 2 of the DeJourno mini-series on Crypto Sapiens. Last time on episode 1, we talked about the fundamentals of journalism and what is going on with journalism nowadays. Why are there issues and what's broken and how can Web3 fix it? And we just basically did a gloss over. And today we're talking about specifically some of those tools that can help journalists get around a lot of the issues going on in journalism. So today I have Clint Minnick, C Street, and Keith Axline, all from the JournoDAO here with me to go over some of these tools. You guys want to give a brief introduction and tell us who you are?
Sure, yeah. So I first met Eric actually in the PubDAO Discord. So that was a similar kind of media Web3 DAO project that's more focused on, started out as a decentralized newswire. And I remember meeting Eric there saying that kind of he was more interested in applications of Web3 and DAOs to journalism in particular, and not just media at large or media having to do with covering Web3 projects, but more journalistic practices. And so he brought me into this project, and it kind of started out just as a discussion group growing into a professional network. And now we're incubating various projects having to do with using this technology for journalism. And it's been fascinating to participate in and watch this network grow.
Yeah, I'm Keith Axline. I'm a full stack developer, formerly editor and writer at Wired Magazine and Medium. And yeah, Eric Mack also roped me into this early on, and it's a great overlap of my interests in both technology and journalism and media, and how to fix the problems in both.
Hi, I'm Crystal Street. I'm a former photojournalist. Been working in the crypto space as a community builder since 2017. And stumbled into JournoDAO accidentally by Twitter in the spring. And then I had found my ride or die degens, so I joined.
Right on. Yeah. Crypto Twitter can be a double-edged sword, two-headed monster, whatever you want to call it. But it can get pretty rowdy sometimes for sure. I guess one thing that we need to start with is just kind of defining what these tools are and maybe putting these tools into some different categories. So I guess, let's start with what categories of tooling are there? I know some deal with NFTs, some are publishing platforms. What else do we have here?
So I don't know what the most useful top level categories are, but some of the ones that come to mind are like immutable storage, which I think is of utmost importance to journalists. There's censorship resistance, and there's transparency tools and community tools, I think, like engaging directly with the community. And then I think more and more journalists are going to need to be thinking of themselves as an independent business. And for that, there are a lot of good just business tools to help monetize your work product.
Okay. So I have like storage, censorship, transparency, community building tools, the business tools. I mean, NFTs can be great, like Unlock Protocol for something like that, to be able to gatekeep some of their content and make money off of it in that way, right? And then reputation systems would be another category of a tool, right? Yeah.
Then also there's the blockchain explorers that can be used as investigative tools for journalists doing on-chain investigations. So I think that could be whole other category. Maybe eventually we'll find some that are built for journalists and not just for developers or general purpose.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I mean, imagine the treasure trove of just weird random stuff you can find on blockchain explorers sometimes. And if you're somebody that loves to go digging around, like almost thrift store shopping on the blockchain explorer to find random stuff.
Yeah, and more so it's going to be since all those, it's pseudonymous, right? Like you can see that this address did all these things, but you have to connect that address to a person, and it kind of allows you to visualize behaviors or identify different behaviors of nodes on the network. That's useful even if you don't know exactly who that person is or what actor that is.
Yeah, one of the initiatives we're working on is with the Diamond DAO, and they're creating a Chainverse is the name of the tool. And we're just advising them on basically how to make this. They're building a knowledge graph and this giant pool of information, and we're looking at it through the eyes of blockchain investigation. So we're helping them craft parts of it that would be directly applicable to journalists that are doing this type of work. So it's not just designed for technologists.
And you say knowledge graph. You want to give a quick little...
The best one to describe that, but basically for me, it's just a way to, instead of organizing information in more data-driven delivery, like spreadsheets or lists or whatever, basically you can type in an organization or a DAO, and it will show all of the connections of the humans as long as they made transactions through wallets. It'll show all of those transactions and who they're connected with. So recently I was doing an interview for something and typed in the person that I was about to hop on a call with. I was curious to see if they were in this graph, because there's still data that's being added to this knowledge graph right now. And it showed some really deep connections of how deep into the ecosystem this person was, which was kind of fascinating to see the connections. And then as we get deeper into decentralized organizations, it is really nice to have a visual or some easier way to see how everyone's connected.
Yeah. So basically tag words that are associated with specific people, right? So you could say like Ridgeline Mall in Indiana, and then that's maybe the only two things that two people may have in common of they may have been at that mall on some certain day and time. And so they're connected on a social graph that way somehow, right?
Yeah. And then as somebody's doing the research or doing the investigation, they can put attributions to that and source links on that individual piece of information. So if someone's doing a deep report, they will always have the source, and it's decentralized. So you can always see the source threads, how the information was found.
Wow. So that could really provide like a really cool way to do some super sleuthing.
Yeah, definitely.
It might be good throughout the conversation to kind of describe how that's different in Web3, because like theoretically you could do that in Web2, but then all that data would like live with a company who would then monetize it for their own purposes. Crystal, I don't know if you want to speak to how Chainverse is like a Web3 version of that, or if they have a good story behind that.
Yeah, they're a DAO. So all of their decisions are made collectively as a community, and no one owns the information. They are using this as a revenue generation tool, so it is subscription based once it goes live. But the money goes into the treasury that supports the community, that then supports other initiatives, like other researchers, other data type driven projects that they're interested in. And this we'll talk about this, I think, in a minute, but this also dovetails right into platform versus protocol. And the evolution of all of this is, in a perfect world, getting us closer to protocols that are run and open source and run by community, as opposed to platforms who are owned by crazy billionaires for the most part.
Okay, so you would say platforms are more of a Web 2 phenomenon that are centralized and all the information on it is stored and owned and on one central location, where a protocol is nothing but a set of instructions for a program to follow or a person or group to follow, right? I mean, what is this difference between protocol versus platform, and how can it be used in this?
So I'll give the overarching version, and then I'll kick the tech over to Keith. So Web 1 was essentially a public good. All of the Web 1 was run off of protocols, HTTP, SMTP, all the things that run email and deliver information on the internet. was all built on open source protocols, and it was a public good. And then Web 2 came along and profit came into the equation. And basically market enclosures commodified the public good. So then we had gated walls around content. And then the users became the product. And that's the clear distinction, is that now we've all been corralled into these bubbles or platforms that are owned by individuals. And now we can see, we don't have to explain the problems. We can see them all on social levels, out in, in real life. You can see the impact of that. And what Web3 offers is a return to protocols. But what's interesting is it's also protocols run, not all the time, but run by community as well. When you introduce DAOs into the equation, like Unlock Protocol is a great example. It's built by a handful of a very active team, but the community directly dictates how the protocol evolves. So if the team ever goes away and eventually they, one of their goals is to exit to community, then the community itself can dictate how the protocol operates and evolves over time. And that was the difference between Web 1 and Web 3, is Web 1 didn't really have that community infrastructure yet.
Okay. Because a lot of people couldn't understand it. There was a huge learning curve back then to even participate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm envisioning like railroad tracks, and the people who decide the width of the railroad tracks that these train cars will ride on are not necessarily the train car manufacturers themselves or Southern Pacific. It's like a group of railroad, engineers that all collaborate together and figure out what would be the best way to do those railroad tracks, and then all the companies have to make their cars to fit that. That's the protocol, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
That's the analogy. Keith, do you have something you want to?
Well, I would just point out the trend. I think that's good to see, like the change from Web 1 to Web 3, and you could almost view it as like the apps of Web 2 that we all, enjoy and use every day, being moved down to the protocol level. It's like the Web 1 protocols were so, elementary that your average person isn't going to really have any use for them or benefit. It was the things built on top of those protocols that actually reached the end user. And so I think the protocols are getting closer to the end user, where you can actually Facebook is a protocol. And I think one key way to think about it is like it's forkable. So like if Facebook shuts down, like all their code just goes away, right? And except for the stuff that they've open sourced. But if one of these protocols in Web3 goes down, somebody can really just take it, fork it, and start a new version, and they can actually. The only thing preventing thousands of the same protocol starting up at once is just a lack of attention that each one would get. It's just not in anybody's interest. But theoretically, you could have like 1,000 unlock protocols or any of these services, and that kind of is a source of the resilience that I think we're trying to promote for journalists. Is like, you can, like, why can you trust in these tools? Because you could theoretically, just take it and use it on your own, in your own little, on your own computer in your own little world. And so for that reason, we can trust that they'll be around in 10 years.
I mean, maybe we should, at least from my understanding, give a little context about what we mean by protocols and forking. At least my understanding is these protocols are algorithms that are deployed onto a shared virtual computer in an open source way, so we can see all those smart contracts that are deployed onto Ethereum. And the way Ethereum itself as a virtual computer is governed, it's in a distributed way, as opposed to a lot of the kind of centralized situations we're talking about before. So everything we're talking about seems to boil down to that at root, this virtual computer that's running all these protocols is itself governed in a distributed way, and everything else kind of follows from that. But maybe I'm overlooking something or oversimplifying.
No, like people used to use email. I mean, people still spin up email servers, and that's a protocol in itself. Anybody can spin up an email server. One of the problems that has developed with anybody trying to run up their own email server is any email that might be generated and come out of their email server will now probably be marked as spam by anybody operating on Gmail or anything like that. And so that's where a lot of the centralization has created a bottleneck from anybody being able to do anything on a protocol level, right?
Yeah, I think email is a great example, but also just in its most like elementary form, I think a protocol is just what is expected of a piece of software. Or like if I'm a developer and I want to use this protocol, like at the very top level, it's just going to say, okay, you're going to have a function named send. You're going to have a function named receive. And depending on the protocol, maybe that's where it stops. But then we've just made an agreement so that another developer that I've never met before wants to build something on that protocol. And then they're like, oh, I need a function named send and I need a function named receive. And so even though we don't know each other, we can build on the same thing, and then our apps will interoperate because I know that this person's app has send and receive functionality, and they know that mine has the same functionality. And so now we have interoperability. And so that's really just what allows people to make a website, because they know like what computers are looking for when they go to download a website. And same with email. And so when we're talking about protocols at like the social layer or in more of these like app layers, it's more like okay, your app has to have a concept of a follow, like so that when users hit follow, like it does something, right? And or likes or whatever. It's kind of like the shared instruction set that we all build on, like Legos. As long as it fits these little like circle patterns, then you can make your own Legos and put it on top.
Yeah, and that's a really important part, is that layer on top so everybody can understand it. When I first got exposed to decentralization technology, it was through BitMessage in like 2012. And I was trying to find a way to communicate with journalists in countries that were run by authoritarians, and they were Gmailing me. And I was like, God, no, that's not a thing. So I found this thing called BitMessage. It was peer-to-peer encrypted decentralized communications. It was meant to function like email. And so I figured it out, and then I set up an account, and then I tried to get them to do it, and no one could figure it out. So that layer of understanding didn't exist. So they still emailed me, which was cool.
Okay. So now that we've kind of gotten the gist of what a protocol is, what would you say are some of the more obvious or easy to use Web3 apps, I guess, built on these protocols?
I'll let Crystal take this one, because my idea of easy to use might not be
fair enough.
Be the same.
Yeah, my idea of easy to use, even though I'm deep in tech, it needs to be explainable to a 5-year-old, because I do not follow directions. So
Okay.
Unlock protocols is one, not great.
Yes.
I work for them, and full disclosure, but they've evolved their user interface recently to make it very Web2 friendly. And now I can show it to everyone, and it can be very easy to use to deploy membership NFTs.
Okay. Can you give a brief description of Unlock Protocol?
Yeah, so it's a NFT is utility, and the main premise is that it allows you to basically token gate content on just about any platform possible or protocol, and it allows you to, as the person that owns the NFT, or as the person that has deployed the NFT, you're able to control your membership without a third party. So there's no one. So if somebody, if you're deployed on WordPress and then you decide, oh, I don't want to use WordPress anymore, and you want to take your community over to some other platform or protocol that uses an NFT as a token gate, then you can take your entire community, and you don't have to, there's no gatekeeper to that. Like right now, if you run something on Patreon or on Facebook, they dictate your community, how you access that information, all of that. So what this protocol allows you to do is take your community wherever you go and wherever you want to go as things evolve. And eventually NFTs are going to be like we talked about earlier. They're going to be like HTTP, SMTP. It's going to be a foundational structure within the internet eventually. And protocols like this will be the ones that lead the way to that. And with something like this, you can also do in real life events. So it has a ticketing functionality. There's just a whole bunch of utility baked into the back end, whereas other NFTs and other platforms and protocols might just be art. You're collecting a piece of art. You're not collecting something that has utility baked in the back end.
Okay. Like as Keith was saying earlier, this platform almost allows, I mean, it does allow a journalist to create their own business.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the protocol allows you to take that wherever you want to take it. And it is community driven. So you can just hop into their server if you get stuck, and someone will help you figure out how to integrate this into your business plan. As long as you have the Ethereum addresses, you can do whatever you want to with them. And that basically gives you a deep connection to your community once you understand the basics of that interaction.
Yeah. And so a journalist might say like, oh, I've run my own WordPress website. I have my subscription list of like everyone who subscribes to me. Like I can do that now. But I think to me, how this differs is a lot of people don't want to be in the business of like storing private information like emails and whatnot. And this totally obviates the need for you to like have a database of your subscribers. Like all you know is like this person's wallet that they have the key to has access to your site, and then you don't need to worry about it. And so I think journalists and writers and media people have been sold this narrative of like, oh, you want to know more about your audience, you want to know so you can like tailor content and you can do all this stuff, and they've been sold like these analytics products and like all this stuff. But I think that kind of dilutes what a lot of people would want to do, where they just want to write their stuff and provide the value and then give people easy ways to access it. And even though the NFT concept and the terminology is a bit foreign, it's really just about, unlock protocol is like perfectly named. It's really just about like giving people easy keys to your stuff, and the cryptography and everything handles like the verification, but so that you can have faith that it's this person. You don't have to like worry about a bunch of bots signing up for your WordPress site. You don't have to worry about like, it's so much overhead, it's so much headache, and it's really it's a rare use case that like a journalist would actually get a lot of benefit from, like knowing a whole bunch about the personal data of their audience. I think this is a better trade-off.
And to tie the unlock example into the previous points about disintermediated protocols and they're like controlled by a community. And maybe this is going too far into the weeds, and maybe it'll lose people, but I think it could be worthwhile to try to use this as an example for what we're talking about in concrete terms. For unlock, I believe if I were to create a membership contract through unlock, and I would set a limit for like 1,000 subscription NFTs, and then set a certain price for them to be purchased at. I believe as the deployer of that membership contract, I have the right to pull back, like to reclaim the subscription NFTs that someone purchased. I believe that's a function that I can call that anyone can call after they deploy that membership contract. Okay. And I'm curious if we're still at the stage where there's a development team that has admin control over this, and they plan to somehow dissolve that central control into a community of people that are governing the unlock protocol. If that ability, like maybe it's just as simple as there being a function in the unlock contract that you deploy, some function that allows you to reclaim NFTs that you've either airdropped to someone or that someone has purchased. If that function can only be claimed by the deployer in that instance of that contract, or if there's some admin somewhere else that can call that function,
Or maybe some time-based type of deployment, I'm thinking about like tickets, and I've used this example before, but say you have a club who's doing live streaming shows, and you give them an NFT as a ticket. They don't have to upload their credit card information and their address and birth date and all that crap, all they got to do is just buy the NFT. They don't give up any of their personal information, and it's not stored on some server somewhere. And so if it had some kind of time thing in there, or some revocation rights, like you're saying, then that could be a good solution on some kind of ticket thing. But they could. So you guys are telling me that Unlock is a protocol, and anybody could add those features into it, like, as an open source protocol?
I believe the expiration is already a feature that they have in there, but I'm not quite sure how that works. If that means that someone can only purchase those membership NFTs up to a certain point, or if after that point they all get burned or revoked. I don't know. Maybe Crystal would know what is meant by that.
Yeah, you can put a time component on it. So if you only want someone to access that information for 1 minute or 30 minutes or 10 years or lifetime, you do that when you deploy your lock. I'm not exactly, Keith's worked with the actual code. I don't believe, and I can't completely confirm this, but I don't believe the team has any access to the actual contracts once they're deployed. I believe that is on the person that created the lock. I mean, anybody can look at the code in that smart contract to see.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, this also brings us back to the legalities of platform versus protocol. A protocol doesn't want to have access to that information. They should not be able to revoke anything, because then they're liable for things. So as a journalist, you also want to make sure you don't have too much information on your people, because at some point those are going to have legal ramifications. And there's stuff in front of the Supreme Court right now about this very topic. So you do want to, it adds a layer of distance between you and the person.
Yeah, because you see this nowadays in people blaming the platform for things like hate speech and stuff like that, and because of people's choices of what they publish, and then the platform gets blamed for it, so this eliminates that. Yeah.
And that's the platform's fault by centralization. I mean, they wanted us all to be products and profit off of it, but now they're going to have to pay the price for that. And the Supreme Court is deciding on Section 230 or whatever the bill is, this month or next month, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
The protocol, at least as it stands now, is what has to be there, but not what can be there. So like you can take an NFT, and as long as it has like the NFT protocol functions, you can then add whatever you want to that contract, and it'll still be an NFT contract. It's like sufficient conditions, but not necessary conditions, or something like that. So if that makes sense.
Yeah. And this kind of leads into another, would you say this is a platform or a protocol? Mirror.xyz. And how is that different? Can it use something like Unlock? Let's explain this.
Yeah, I can give my understanding of it. I think a lot of companies are maybe not protocols yet, but are kind of like Web 2.5. And what we're doing is when you move over to like what is essentially a shared computer, like Ethereum or Bitcoin or any other blockchain, it's like a single computer that everybody uses. And it's so early now that everything gets backed up a lot because there's so many people trying to use it. And so when you try and launch a whole publishing platform like on Ethereum or on a blockchain, we're under like physical constraints right now that we don't really have with like web servers. You can just like, you can buy a huge computer and host like a whole like Medium or blogging platform with like hundreds of thousands of users, no problem. And like that content, like storage is getting super cheap. Like you can have terabytes and terabytes of data under your control, all that stuff. But when it's a shared computer, we're kind of like back in like 1980s, like floppy disk, like, oh, I can't, like the games we can play are like literally limited by like that 1024K storage or whatever. And so something like Mirror is trying to put as much of their stuff on chain as possible. And there's also other distributed systems that we can talk about, like IPFS, where it's not technically a blockchain, but there's still like peer-to-peer decentralization where it's like very robust and censorship resistant. But I think a lot of companies right now are just trying to put as much as they can like on these computers, so you can like take a huge piece of content and then hash it down to like a tiny little like 2 kilobyte thing, and then put that on chain, and then like there is like verification that that piece of content actually existed in that form at that time, and so that part's verifiable. But you can't like expand that 2K thing up into a blog post or a photo or whatever, because if you put like a whole 16 megabyte photo on chain, like everybody else's work would like come to a halt.
That's why we have all the crappy 8-bit graphic NFTs,
Yeah.
because those are actually on chain. And then
Yeah.
Does Mirror actually put articles on chain?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, like what Keith just described. Are they on Arweave or IPFS? I can't remember. They put it on a decentralized server, but you can still edit it. So even after it's minted, I can still edit it. So prior to this summer, when you minted something on Mirror, you minted the artwork that was associated with the article.
Okay.
And this summer, they deployed a writing as NFTs, and they had deployed it on Optimism, which is a different chain. And when I mint an article, it mints the whole thing, and I still believe that is still on Arweave or on a decentralized server. So technically, they have access to the content and could remove it if they needed to. Like if the Supreme Court thing goes through and they have to take things down, they could. So that's like Keith said, it's publishing 2.5 or Web 2.5. They are a DAO. I am loosely in there, like just because I use them. And I have one of their tokens. I'm not active in their DAO. I started to get involved, and it was a lot of action. But so they are dictated by community. And that's
so they are. I'm seeing like a gradient of like decentralization, decentralization, and there's various things. Unlock is. Would you say Unlock's more decentralized in a way? Kind of being more of a protocol, and then Mirror is kind of getting more towards the platform side of things.
Yeah, Unlock in its inception has their founder strongly believes in the Web 1 and Web 3 version of things, and they will always maintain that. So they'll always be completely decentralized protocol driven by community. And they've actually had people use the token or use the protocol and then wall it off as a centralized thing. And that's like, oof.
Okay.
So,
I mean, could you incorporate Unlock into something like Mirror and then token gate your articles on Mirror?
You could. I think somebody has tried to figure it out, but Unlock actually created their own platform called Headline. It was done by a grantee, so it really wasn't done by the team.
Okay.
And then we also, Photure, which was, who's one of our supporters at JournoDAO, they then created an integration. They're still working on it to allow, to basically make it a little more user-friendly, to add that layer of usability on top of it, like we talked about earlier, so that it is a little more user-friendly, but that is completely decentralized. I believe it goes to IPFS, and there is no person that could take any content down. So that's, as far as I know, that is the only publishing platform that has that capability.
So for things like Arweave or IPFS, I think maybe Ceramic is in that territory too, of like distributed servers that aren't actual blockchains. Do you have to pay to add to those databases?
Yeah, and that's what makes them secure. So basically, people are getting, just everyday people. You can do it. You can get paid for this. You're contributing your computer to like the IPFS network or the Filecoin network. I'm not sure if IPFS actually has a monetization or incentive system. I think Filecoin is like the incentive system built on top of it, where As somebody who wants to store data, I pay this amount, and then that goes to people who store it. And then as somebody who stores data for other people, then I get paid when I store data for other people. But there's not like a central Filecoin server company managing this. It's just like the software that powers that incentive system is also decentralized. So that can't be shut down. So it just kind of operates independent of anyone.
Okay. So nobody owns, I guess, the blockchain, and anybody that wants to participate in it. And IPFS, interplanetary file system, also anybody can run those nodes and contribute to it. Mm-hmm. IPFS has its coin, which is Filecoin, right? And then
Filecoin is a separate entity.
Okay, all right.
So the gateway is what you pay for, like as a user. You would pay for gateway access, and the gateway access allows you to send it to IPFS if you're not running your own node.
Okay.
And then something like Pinata is a really good, again, that user layer on top that allows you to pin, and you pay. They have a free version, but you pay $20 a month if you want to pin something to IPFS and not have it get kicked out for non-use. So if you're creating your own NFT and you want to make sure that the artwork is on IPFS and is not going to get removed from not being used, you would then pin it through a gateway service.
Okay.
And that way it won't be removed. That's my understanding of it.
All right. So they're all various degrees of centralization versus decentralization of how you get stuff up onto the decentralized network, storage network, right? Yeah. And so if it's on the decentralized storage network, just because one server gets shut down doesn't mean your data or your article or picture, photo, whatever is gone, because it's everywhere.
Yeah. And recently there was something, I believe is with the Tornado Cache issue. Someone was using a Cloudflare gateway, and then Cloudflare removed the gateway when they realized it was somebody had forked Tornado Cache after all that went down, and used a Cloudflare gateway to get it onto IPFS so other people could access and the forked code because it's a protocol. And then Cloudflare went ahead and shut down the gateway, which then shut down the access to that information.
Yeah.
So that's where it's so messy. We're so early in this tech. It is not steaming dumpster fire.
Yeah, I think just framing this as, let's separate like the front end stuff from the back end stuff. Like this division, I think, is really important. Like it's still a little confusing to me if I don't like think about it. But there's what gets to Web 2.5 is you have a Web 2 front end. Like you can definitely shut down websites, like Unlock Protocol's website. Like you can shut it down. It's like, unless they're hosting it directly off of IPFS, which is super slow, so nobody really does it. Like you can actually, like Cloudflare or any of these like Web 2 points of centralization can like take down the websites that you use to access these tools. But part of the confusion, I think, is you can't actually see any of this stuff that we're talking about, any of these protocols. There's no UI to it. Like it's just computers running, and it's like, even if you're running a node for something, there might be a UI built on top of it, but there doesn't have to be. It's just kind of like running in the background on
it's code.
Yeah, it's just code. It's like you can watch some code go by, but like whatever you want to be able to matrix style, like make sense of it. And so it's these background processes that can't be stopped, but you can like aside from that though, like as you try and build a bridge from that to the user through UI layers and abstractions, like each one of those things that you add on then adds a layer of centralization or like things that can shut down. So like, and like I said, the protocols will get closer to the user, but like right now it's really easy for critics to be like, well, you can shut down the Unlock website, so it's not truly censor proof or what. And it's like, well, yeah, and you can like, even Ethereum blockchain needs web servers to then handle your transactions, right? Like, and we've centralized it that way where you have to send it to the web server first. And so then those become, the user always has the option of getting the software, it's open sourced. Forking is like copying and pasting. You can just like copy and paste it. and run it yourself on your computer. And you can run Ethereum on your computer. You can run any of these things. They just won't be very fun because nobody else is using it. So you connect to the network, but like you could run a little like microcosm Ethereum network in your house. You could run, 5 different like nodes on like Raspberry Pis and like whatnot. You could like recreate all this stuff, but the whole point is that the use comes from the network effects of there having this one thing that everyone agrees is like, we're all going to use this. It's not technology plus community and plus this contractual agreement that like, this is the thing that we're going to do. And that's kind of like the contractual agreement is the protocol is like Ethereum does these things. So if you want to do those things with us, you can do those things.
And to tie this all back into journalism, and one of the reasons I got into this tech to begin with years ago was because of what Keith's talking about. Like, you need to understand the back end, at least conceptually. I mean, there's no way I could go in and build any of this, but I can understand it conceptually. So I know that my information is safe and the things that I'm reporting on are safe. And when I was an active journalist, when I watched Occupy Wall Street break on Twitter, and watched the way people communicated at scale at something that was so huge, and then watched right after that the Arab Spring happen, and then watched governments shut down those servers. I was like, oh, we really need to, as journalists, we really need to understand how does this information flow through the servers around the world?
Yeah.
If you want to build a website in Web 2 world and have it be completely free, you need to host that in Iceland. And it needs to run through something like Orange Website. And then your email needs to run through a country that has laws in place that the government can't shut it down, and you can't be on a .com. I don't think people realize that. If the government wanted to, they could shut down every .com with a few flicks of a switch. If you have a .me or .something in a country that has stronger privacy laws in place, you can't be immediately shut down. And if your servers are in Iceland, you also can't immediately be shut down. But then you also know how to deploy them on a static website so that WordPress can come in and say, oh, hey, we got to remove you because we just got a cease and desist from the government. Like, there's an entire web happening. And that's where, for me, Web3 is so important, because these protocols that are running in the background will not disappear if the Unlock Protocol website goes down. You can still buy our NFTs, and I can still communicate with you because I have your email address. Your Ethereum address. And that, when we break it down in that way, I think every journalist needs to learn this and understand it if they want to protect their sources and their information and their ability to communicate in the world we're all about to roll up in. And that's that's the segue into next week's topic.
Yeah, the censorship. There's the back end understanding that's necessary. There's the whole idea of also taking out the middlemen so journalists can support themselves as well. And, I don't know how much journalists are paid, but I can't imagine a lot of journalists make a living, a really, really good living off of doing stuff that's not hit pieces or sensationalist type of stuff. Like truly investigative or local journalism is probably not your biggest moneymaker, so things like decentralized media platforms could possibly help people that want to support that type of journalism, help those journalists make a living. Like, for instance, there's varying degrees of it. And I want to talk about some of these other platforms too. There's PublishOX, there's Paragraph, there's Mirror, and they all have varying degrees of centralization in there, but I wanted to talk about some of these others, like PublishOX, for instance. That's just basically, it just allows people to kind of tip the writer in cryptocurrency. That's it. It's totally centralized, right? And then we have Paragraph. I'll let you guys talk about Paragraph, and then maybe we can kind of compare all these.
Yeah, I think let's take the Mirror example first, because it has like the most relevant cross section of parts where. So you create a story on Mirror just like you would on Medium or any other platform, but then they offer this minting functionality, right? And so when a user will like read your story, if they want to mint it as an NFT, what that means is in like Web 2 terms, they're basically buying an edition of that story from you. You could have just one, you could have 10, you can have like 10 editions at this price, you can have one edition at this price. But in Web 2, like, why would anyone want to buy that from you? Because that would just be Mirror. It's like, oh, I bought like a record in this database owned by Mirror or Facebook or whatever. So you know that you don't really have ownership over that because you can't do anything with it. You can't take it with you. You can't say, oh, I want to do this with that. You can maybe like buy the IP, but it's just like, it's all very fuzzy. And so minting is like, okay, we're going to collapse this story down to like that 2K or just like that very small hash or whatever, put that on the blockchain as like proof of like, okay, this person, this story, this author, this time, wrap that up and finalize it on an immutable blockchain, and then link that to the actual content and media of the story on IPFS. And then, so as long as like you have that, that's proof of ownership of this. Now somebody might be able to access that, the media and everything on IPFS, but nobody can change the fact that like you bought this at this time. So you kind of have proof of ownership. And then if there's only 10 of them or only one of them, then you actually have digital scarcity, where in Web 2, you can just copy and paste all day and there's nothing to distinguish like that this person's relationship to this record is any different than this person's relationship. Like there's no tracking of provenance or ownership that's like is not tamper-proof or that is tamper-proof. So people joke like, oh, Web3 is just like, or NFTs are just ownership of a record in a database or something. And it's like, well, yeah, but we've never really had that before, because anything else, you would have just had to trust whoever made the screenshot, whoever says that you have access to it, whoever says that you own that, and you can't like take it to the bank, you can't like trade it, you can't do anything with it. And so NFTs are actually like, that proof of ownership is under your control. You could sell it, you could put it here, you could do it, put it there, you could like make it interact with this app that nobody even knew about 10 years ago when you bought it. You could make it do all this stuff. It's like digital permanence and property rights, digital property rights. And those two things like we've never had in this way before. And so a lot of this stuff sounds like, you could do it with Web 2, but it's meaningfully different. And so that's kind of like, and so that Mirror example is, I think, maybe demonstrative of how that, so it leaves the Web 2 world of like the UI of writing your post, uploading your photo, and then the minting of the NFT and the placing on IPFS is where it enters Web 3 territory. And those operations are done most likely by a Web 2 server. So it's a Web 2 server interacting with the blockchain on your behalf to do all the stuff, but you can verify that it did it properly, and then interacting with IPFS, but you can verify that it all went there. And then the web server's done until it like needs to read that for, to show you this person minted, your stuff is stored over here. But you could build, Mirror doesn't have exclusivity on that, right? Like you could build a different UI that does all that stuff. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I wanted to compare it to Paragraph then and Publish OX and how that's different then.
Yeah, well, Paragraph's hard to talk about because I think they're developing very quickly. So I don't want to say that something's
sure. None of us represent these projects, Like
yeah, but my understanding when I looked at it before was it is mostly Web 2, and like the main Web 3 functionality was newsletter subscriptions were done with NFTs. And so instead of going and subscribing to a Substack through your email and like setting up or through your Substack account or whatever, as long as your wallet holds this NFT, then you can access this Paragraph.
I could be wrong because I don't know that much about it either, but I'm under the impression that it's not a protocol, at least maybe not yet. Maybe there's some plans to, but I don't know. But I think that is the main point there. That's how the Web3 figures in, is you can have a newsletter and require a reader to connect the wallet and have X amount of such and such token to read this content. And, and of course, probably if it's, you can find screenshots of that content elsewhere, but I think there's like, we're getting into the territory of how do we solve those problems? But in the case of Paragraph, I don't think it is currently a protocol, and I don't know if they have plans to turn into a protocol. Something that you can fork.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. Like, if you're going to use these platforms to publish on, you really do want to dig into the community behind them. So I highly recommend hopping into the Discord servers of these platforms, which is always on their website, and see if, how do they communicate about their platform or protocol? Is it a platform or a protocol? How much access do you have to the underlying technology and to the people that are building it? I mean, I think that's a huge part of this. This is one of the cool things about Web3 is we're bringing humans back into a lot of these equations. You have accessibility to humans. Like, when I get stuck on something like a Mirror, I just hop in their Discord. I'm like, hey, I'm stuck. And then somebody usually gets back to me pretty quick. So you want to make sure that's there as well. Like, there's support for you as you're going to go down that journey, because you're going to get stuck everywhere. So
I wanted to talk about the previous attempt at decentralized journalism through Civil, and then how they were using that to kind of build a reputation system for journalists via tokenization. I know we're pretty much out of time, but that might be a good topic next week for the censorship episode, and how reputation systems can, help, fight censorship in a way. So.
And Eric can start our drinking game every time somebody mentions the word civil.
I know. I was at the ONA conference, and it just seems like everybody's like, oh, so this is like Civil. Yeah. I'm like, no, it's not like Civil. So.
I mean, Civil had a great premise. I remember when they came on, I was like, ooh, a journalism decentralization thing. I was so excited, in 2018. And even I couldn't understand it. And I had access to really smart people who could explain it to me. And they're like, I mean, it was just ahead of its time, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in brief, it just provided a way for people to hold the Civil token and to be able to contribute and give those tokens to journalists who they thought were credible, thereby creating kind of a reputation system for journalists. Anyway, we'll go into that next week. I guess we'll go ahead and finish up. I wanted to add that we do have the JournoDAO NFT. And if you don't understand or support the mission, don't buy the NFT. But if you do understand and you totally support what we're doing, buy the JournoDAO NFT. And it also, Crypto Sapiens podcast will also get a percentage of the proceeds of that. So you'd be supporting two projects at once. And and we're hoping that these episodes will really clarify some of the murky territory. We're not going to clarify everything, because Web3 is still murky territory in itself. And if you love the adventure and the mystique of that, then you're in the right place. So, all right. Thank you guys for jumping on, and we'll see you next week.